What's the scariest, most terrifying thing that actually exists? Prion. They're basically screwed up proteins that make other proteins get screwed up the same way, like some sort of molecular zombie. Once you have a prion disease, it will slowly destroy your brain by messing up proteins that are vital for life. Once you have it, there's no cure and no treatment. You're just done for. And it can incubate for years. You can have it right now and not know. And as a fun little bonus, disinfectants and other methods of killing viruses, parasites, and bacteria will do nothing for a prion. Fatal familial insomnia is possibly the freakiest prion disease. You just can't sleep. You get progressively worse insomnia until you can't sleep at all anymore, which causes delirium, hallucinations, and eventually death. Imagine just knowing your mind is slowly slipping away, all because your body won't sleep. That is a prion disease.
Prion are pretty wild. The idea that something can lurk for years and then just wreck you is unsettling. It's a good reminder of how strange and fragile life can be, no matter how tough we think we are.
Alligators, plain and simple. Archer covers this perfectly. From Season 5 Episode 8 Cyril Figgis, Why Are You So Afraid of Crocodiles? Sterling Archer, gee, I don't know, Cyril. Maybe deep down, I'm afraid of any apex predator that lived through the KT extinction. Cyril Figgis, the Sterling Archer, physically unchanged for 100 million years because it's the perfect killing machine, a half-ton of cold-blooded fury with the bite force of 20,000 newtons and a stomach acid so strong it can dissolve bones and hooves. And now we're surrounded, those snake eyes are watching from the shadows waiting for the night.
The way he describes them makes you think about their raw power and the instinctive fear they inspire. It's a simple yet effective reflection on nature and survival.
The dementia Alzheimer's stuff is crazy. This year my sister and I discovered our father, only 58 years old, was responding to internet scams and sending large amounts of his money overseas to strangers, more than $25,000. This was shocking because we have never seen any behaviors like this. We took him to the doctor and they discovered a shrinkage of the brain and diagnosed him with dementia. He was a really sharp business executive my entire life, and now he is having trouble getting a job as cashier anywhere. I feel so bad, but there isn't much we can do but love and support him. Anyone else go through something similar?
That's a tough situation. Dementia can change a person fast, and it sounds like it caught you off guard. Just being there for him and supporting him is important. Other people might have similar experiences, but everyone handles it differently.
As part of dementia awareness training, our instructor gave us an interesting insight. She said that you need to imagine two bookshelves, one is made of solid oak and is sturdy, the other is a cheaply made set. Now on the cheap shelves we store our memories, early memories are on lower shelves and newer memories get stored higher up. On the oak shelves we store our emotions attached to those memories. With dementia, the cheap shelf is rocked and the memories start to fall from the top whilst the emotions stay put on the sturdy shelf. We still retain the emotions but lose important details associated with certain memories.
That's a pretty clear analogy. The idea of memories being on a cheap shelf makes sense. It's interesting how emotions remain intact even when the details fade. I can see why it would be useful in training for dementia awareness. It provides a way to understand the impact of the disease on people's lives.
Certainly terrifying. I was swimming in a pretty nasty, stagnant pool/pond of water that was an offshoot of the Colorado River. My friends and I were there for a week, squishing through the mossy ground and stirring up all the nasty stuff in there. It wasn't until a week after we left that we found out a girl died there just days after our trip from a brain-eating amoeba. In retrospect, that water was disgusting and shouldn't have been swam in at all, but beer plus girls means you'll do something dumb to impress them.
Swimming in unknown water can lead to some real dangers. Those risks can really sneak up on you.
Yup. We would do a lot of case studies in my parasitology course, and Naegleria fowleri was by far the worst to read about. It was the same terrible story over and over. Healthy individual in early 20s is out enjoying life, and goes wakeboarding, jet skiing, cliff diving etc. in warm fresh water. A little water gets up their nose, but other than that, they're fine. The next day they get a bad headache. They notice their sense of smell fade away completely. Then they slip into a coma and are dead before the week is out. It's absolutely the stuff of nightmares.
Naegleria fowleri is definitely not something you'd want to mess with. Life can turn on a dime. Just a reminder of how fragile things can be sometimes.
Fun fact, Yellowstone is caused by a hotspot under the Earth's crust and has been erupting regularly, from a geological standpoint, for the past 20 million years at least, and has formed the entire Snake River Plain and then some. This includes Yellowstone National Park, craters of the Moon National Monument, which I really want to see, and the Columbia River flood basalts. This hotspot is why the geology and geography of the Northwest United States and parts of southern Canada are so cool. If the Yellowstone caldera does erupt, it would probably be a smaller eruption. Even a small eruption from Yellowstone could still be quite devastating, but it wouldn't have catastrophic consequences. An eruption is incredibly unlikely, but a gigantic one is even less so.
That's an interesting overview of Yellowstone. The hotspot idea makes sense when you consider its effects on the surrounding area. It's wild to think about how long it's been active. Even a small eruption seems serious, though. It's good to know that a massive eruption is unlikely, but still, it's something to keep in mind for the future. The geology there really is unique.
It's actually very rare. In most parts of the developed world, as it kills its host and doesn't spread easily, it's not very successful as a virus. Try not to freak out too much. Edit, adding on to this, only 15 people have been infected in the US in the past decade and 2 of those survived. Edit 2, FFS, read the comments before posting your own, like 40 people have pointed out some kid died in FL this week from it. That doesn't make it common, it just means someone happened to die from it this week. Edit 3, found out NYC recently tested 1,248 animals and found 23 with rabies, so only about 1.7% of the rats, bats, and raccoons they tested came back positive. Also, urban animals tend to have a higher chance of contracting the disease because they're living in much closer proximity and in greater numbers than they would in the wild, so if you extrapolate from that, it's unlikely any random animal you run into in the woods will be infected. That said, if you get bitten by anything, wash the wound with soap and water, then get medical attention immediately. Rabies isn't the only disease transmitted by bites, and puncture wounds can become infected easily.
Seems like rabies is pretty rare in the developed world. The info about urban animals having a higher chance makes sense, but it doesn't mean every animal out there is infected. Just keep an eye out and take care of yourself.
To elaborate on the kill rate, you technically don't have a 100% chance to contract it after you're bitten. Rabies travels along your nervous system to your brain, and may fail to get there. But, if it reaches your brain, you are already dead. From what I've read, throughout all of human history, there have only been something like 27 confirmed cases of someone surviving at this point. All of those are believed to be really weird circumstances, where the person had a natural immunity for some reason. So, the survival rate is more like 10 billion to 1 against you. Feel any better? Also, on it reaching your brain. You have to be treated before that happens, so between the bite and then. If bitten on a foot or hand, that could be weeks. If bit on your neck and you know the animal had rabies, you may want to begin to plan your funeral.
This gives a pretty clear picture of how serious rabies is. The time factor between a bite and treatment really adds to the urgency.
It's even worse. We've recently discovered that it doesn't zombify the insect, rather, the insect is still itself and wants to fulfill its objectives, but the fungus has hijacked it to take the wheel. TLOU would have been so much worse if you were slaughtering conscious humans. Since this blew up, I wanted to add that in the case of ants, the Cordyceps work by essentially colonizing the muscle fibers of the ant. However, not all Cordyceps work the same. Some of them grow in the brain, however they don't target specific areas, which means only part of it is affected while other parts may not be. It can be a slow and brutal process. Thank God it only affects bugs, and Cordyceps can be enjoyed by humans for their adaptogenic qualities. Edited to reword conscious, since ants/bugs don't have the neural complexity for actual consciousness, but at the time I didn't have a better word. Don't read it before bed.
Makes you think about the implications of nature's pests and how they work. Cordyceps really show how complex these interactions can be, even if they're mainly an issue for bugs. Good to know they have some benefits for humans too. Kind of a double-edged sword, I guess.
I'm shocked this is so low in the thread. Just imagine getting a warning about incoming missiles, a la Hawaii, and waiting 30 minutes to die, wondering whether anybody you love will survive, whether they will starve to death, what will happen to society, whether you'd ever see them again if you survive, nuclear winter, etc. Not to mention getting incinerated in a flash of light or obliterated by 700 miles per hour irradiated winds. Edit. Since I'm getting a lot of messages along the lines of dementia/slow death is much worse than instant incineration, I want to make it clearer that to me, the scary thing is not knowing what will happen to the people I love, and not knowing what will happen to our species. I mean, having humanity die off in self-immolation/irradiation/nuclear winter is scary to me, not because I will die instantly, but because it makes all of human history and all of our potential and my loved ones' potential completely meaningless. It would make all of human existence into a joke. The reason it's a joke is because we would do it to ourselves. Poof. That concept is far scarier to me than dying of dementia, which, as I've said in another comment, is also terrible. It's just a different perspective.
The uncertainty about the future and the fate of loved ones can be really heavy. The idea of everything we've built and everyone we care about being wiped out makes the whole situation feel even worse. It's not just about the immediate danger, but the long-term implications for humanity.
I had to scroll way too far to find this. I have sleep paralysis, and often, instead of a mysterious presence in my room, it's an actual image of something trying to kill me. Picture this. You wake up from a dream, and there is a giant wolf standing on top of you, pressing its paws onto your chest. It's baring its teeth in your face. You want to scream and push it off of you, but you can't move a muscle. You can't make a sound. You are completely helpless to do anything while this literal nightmare come to life prepares to sink its teeth into your face. All you can do is stare and be completely terrified. After 15 long seconds, you can suddenly move again, but the wolf vanishes without a trace. You realize it wasn't real. Time to get back to sleep and prepare for another productive day. That was me a few weeks ago.
Sleep paralysis can be really frightening, especially with such vivid imagery. The feeling of being trapped like that, while seeing something threatening, must be awful. It's good that you were able to move again, but the aftermath seems really unsettling. Makes you think about what sleep might really be like sometimes. Hopefully, you get more rest without those kind of interruptions.
I'm going to see my grandmother next week for the first time in 3 years. I've been living abroad. After a fall last year, she entered an unusually rapid mental decline. Most times, she doesn't recognize her visitors, and rarely can sustain any lucid conversation. I'm glad to see her, but I'm already bracing for how it might be a pretty disappointing visit. Edit. My story is pretty common, it seems. Thanks for the encouragement, all. I figure whatever happens, it's good that I get at least one more chance to see her, and it'll be good to see my granddad, and the next day I'll go see my sister and her kids, one of whom I've never met at all, and it'll be a good week even if my grandmother isn't having a great day when I see her. Peace to all of you with relatives who are fading out of this world, and great thanks to those of you who care for the elderly professionally. Facing these things with patience and hope brings us all a little closer.
It's understandable to feel a mix of emotions about the visit. It sounds like you're preparing for the reality of the situation, while still finding value in spending time with family. Plus, catching up with your granddad and meeting your sister's kids adds some good moments to look forward to. It's about making the most of the time you have.
Fun fact, I studied abroad in Australia during a summer, and one day we went on a tour of rainforest up by Cairns. We're on a jeep/boat hybrid, and the guide points out that plant which is just within reach of some of the girls in my class. A few start to reach for it. Don't touch it though. I'll tell you why in a bit. The hands retract, but some guys and girls jokingly go to reach for it still. Luckily common sense won and no one touched it before we moved past it, but 15 minutes later the guide finally tells us why we shouldn't touch the plant. People were horrified they even reached for it. Edit. Because I feel bad for all the hate the guide is getting. This happened a few years back, so I don't remember all the details, but I'll share more of what I remember. The vehicle was already moving out of range when he warned us, so the people continuing to reach for it would have had to work really hard to actually touch it, and I don't recall a lot of effort to touch it. That's why I say common sense won, but it might have been laziness. He told us why when we passed by another of the same plants, but the second one was way out of reach, so it might have been his method for stopping idiots who go, can't be that bad. And all this happened after we had a nice long discussion about being careful and listening to him. So it was like a reminder warning. Because it's Australia.
People always think they know better, even after warnings. Kind of funny how everyone was horrified after the fact. It's a reminder that common sense isn't as common as we think, especially in a place like that.
When I was a kid, we used to ride our bikes up and down the sides of a drainage ditch. One spring, I went out by myself and it was after a sudden spring rain. Everything looked normal, maybe a little damp, but it would still be fun riding. Went down one side, got stuck in the mud in the middle. Tried to struggle out and kept getting sucked in further. Eventually, I was buried vertically in 4 feet of mud, bike under me, before I found something to grab onto to pull myself out. My bike is still down there, 25 years later. Edit, from my reply to going and getting it. If anyone is up for it, here's the approximate coordinates, 42.9416678, minus 83.57845563. It's a black Huffy. I think it had 3 sprockets on the front and 5 on the back hub, so it would have been like a 15-speed bike. Something like that. Anyway, we used to play back there before they built a neighborhood, but it appears the drainage ditch is still there. And, I didn't get in a ton of trouble, surprisingly. My parents seemed more amused that I was covered from my feet to upper chest in mud. I don't know what they thought about me tracking it in the mudroom, though.
Getting stuck in mud is no joke. But it's interesting how a childhood adventure can turn into a memory like that. They probably just enjoyed seeing you covered in mud. Overall, pretty wild experience.
What OP didn't include is that nearly all instances of anesthesia awareness last less than 5 minutes. Now that you're aware of it, you're also much less likely to be traumatized by it, since you know it's a possibility. If it does happen, just sit tight and try to stay calm and wait for it to pass. It's pretty rare, by the way. Also, it may be really hard to stay calm since you might feel like you're tripping or that you are having a spiritual or near-death experience. Just know that it will pass and you'll be back on Reddit soon enough.
Seems like anesthesia awareness isn't as common as some might think. Knowing it's usually brief is reassuring. Reddit will still be there when it's over.
It can't be that bad. There used to be rabid dogs running around the US in suburban neighborhoods. Very few people actually got rabies, even while living amongst animals with it. The virus is not easy to spread, and the timing has to be perfect from when the animal is strong enough to bite you, but can also transfer the virus to you. That's like a one-day period. Even if they do bite you, it's not guaranteed you're going to get rabies. Just like having sex with a person with AIDS is not necessarily going to give you the disease. In fact, the transfer rate is less than 0.5% for HIV, which is actually considered high. Diseases/viruses don't spread as easily as people seem to think, otherwise humans wouldn't have even survived. There's many factors that go into getting a disease, and the stronger your immune system is, the lower the chances are. Hell, even vaccinations, which are medically designed, proven, and researched things, don't have a 100% rate of success in giving you the immunity. You can literally put a disease in a needle, mass inject it into people, and still not everyone is going to get the disease.
It's interesting how many factors come into play with disease spread. It's true, you can be around potential dangers and still not get sick. Also, the role of the immune system is key.